Hi everyone, Rachael here. Welcome to another episode of the Ditch the Diet podcast. Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for a brand new episode of the Ditch the Diet podcast. If you are a new listener, welcome. Thank you for joining us. The Ditch the Diet podcast is a podcast designed for anyone and everyone who wants to create a better, healthier relationship with food, their bodies, exercise, and maintain a healthy relationship with food. So if that is you, then you are in the right place. Thank you for joining us, and please subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on all of our future episodes. You can also go back and look at over 70 previous episodes as well. There's loads of listening to do, so hopefully you'll find something that takes your fancy in there. If you're a regular listener, thanks for coming back. I appreciate you very, very much. Please don't forget to leave a review of the podcast if you haven't done that already. I ask you every single week because I know it only takes 2 minutes to scroll down on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Click the little 5-star review button and leave a couple of sentences about what you think of the podcast. It really helps me to get it out to more people. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Today's podcast episode is following on our Nutrition Myths series. This one's a bit different though, because today we are talking about the myths surrounding diabetes. So I had the pleasure of speaking to Emma and Will from We Nutrition. Emma and Will are both specialist registered dietitians who specialise in the management of diabetes. And we are talking about everything from the myths surrounding type 2 diabetes. We touch on type 1 diabetes as well, and we talk about the effects of sugar and lots of other things that you might have heard about this topic. So even if you are not affected by diabetes, this is a good one to listen to, because obviously type 2 diabetes is on the rise in this country. Mostly due to lifestyle factors, so there may be some interesting little nuggets that you can take away from this episode that will help you to maintain a healthy lifestyle going forward into the future. I'll be back at the end of this podcast to tell you a little bit more about where you can find Emma and Will if you want to find out more about what they do, and to tell you a little bit about the Ditch the Diet Academy. So I'll see you then.
So we are recording a series just now about sort of dispelling some big nutrition myths, of which there are many. And so I thought we could kind of start off by asking you to give me a little introduction. So who are you both and what do you do?
Sure. Okay, I'll go first. So I'm Emma. I'm a registered dietitian. I currently work in a diabetes centre in a London hospital. I'm from South West Wales, and ended up coming to London after looking for a few different jobs and specialising in diabetes a few years ago now, and that's where I crossed paths with Will, and we ended up working together in King's College Hospital a few years ago.
And I'm Will. I'm a registered dietitian as well, originally from Manchester. Made my way down to London. I specialise in diabetes when I was working in Nottingham. And then I came down to London, met Emma. Since then, I've moved on to a health and wellbeing company that provides services for the NHS around pre-diabetes, type 2 remission, and just general health and wellbeing.
Ah, that sounds amazing. So how did you get interested in diabetes management then? Was that something you just fell into, or was there a special reason that you got interested in, Emma?
So yeah, I've had quite a few sort of different positions since becoming registered. So I started off in like an acute varied role, which is quite typical for a dietitian. So doing things like the stroke ward, elderly care, respiratory, that sort of thing, and very much a nutrition support perspective. I then tried a slightly different angle and worked in public health, so very much looking at weight management for adults and for families, which was pretty challenging, and decided that wasn't really the kind of career path that I wanted to go down, and saw that there was this position available in this pretty amazing diabetes centre in London and thought that I would chance it as trying something a little bit different. And kind of just found my passion, really. I've always been someone who's really into numbers and working with people long term, and diabetes really kind of ticked those boxes for me. And yeah, I really just found what I enjoyed doing.
Yeah. What about you, Well? Was it similar story for you, or?
Yeah, very similar. As a graduate dietitian, you tend to go into the NHS. A lot of people start working on wards, and you do rotations and things. So you get to grips with lots of different sort of disease areas, and it can very much become a numbers game. You're trying to get people out of hospital, and I just felt like that really wasn't for me. I wasn't getting to know people. I wasn't getting to see progress, and then I started getting a little bit of experience in diabetes. And I was doing group work, and I was sort of seeing people on a one-to-one basis over a long period of time. And I just really, really enjoyed it. Like, I love the science, I love the numbers, but it's that relationship that you get to build with people and working really closely with your colleagues. It's sort of the best example of teamwork that I've ever come across.
Yeah, definitely.
When working with people. And it just gives you that really, really warm feeling. Like, I come away from the end of the day and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I feel like I've made a bit of a difference today. And hopefully I've sort of helped people to change their lives in some way.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about your company. Do you pronounce it just We Nutrition, or is it WE Nutrition?
Yeah. So we nutrition.
Yeah.
So it's funny, we were sort of like sparring around different names and ideas.
So many ideas.
For ages. And the we, it's quite nice because it's sort of like Will and Emma. But we originally came to it because we wanted to say something that, you were instantly recognizing that was associated with food, but also something that said that it was very encompassing and it was open to all.
For everyone, yeah.
Absolutely. And, we just want to try and capture that in a name, and that's how we came up with We.
Exactly, yeah. It was, we kind of thought, it's definitely the best one we've come up with so far. And it's very kind of personal to us, says what we do. Yeah, and as Will says, it kind of hopefully sends that message that we're open to kind of working with everyone.
Yeah. What services do you offer then? Is it diabetes specific as well?
Yeah, so since we are both specialist dietitians in diabetes, we focus on diabetes, but then, that can also include pre-diabetes, gestational diabetes, all types of diabetes. And we look at sort of complex weight management as well, as often that will go hand in hand with maybe more long-term type 2 diabetes. So far, we've worked with a range of people, both on a one-to-one level, but also in groups and with big organisations as well.
It's been a real variety, particularly in terms of our more sort of, what we call our We corporate packages. There's been really quite a selection of things we've done so far. So that includes things like corporate menu analysis. So for specific events, certain charities who want their menus to be carb counted. So if they know that people with type 1 diabetes are going to be attending, that takes so much of the guesswork out and can make dosing that insulin just so much easier. And if you know exactly what you're going to be having. So we've been doing that we've done that on a couple of occasions. We're working with a company looking at some consultancy work around vitamins at the moment as well. We've been doing some wellness workshops around lunchtime for companies. So really, really broad, different sort of sections of our corporate arm as well. And then, in terms of our one-to-one, as Will said, a lot of it is diabetes focused because we've done a lot of training and time of working with people with this condition, and we feel like there's not other people out there perhaps who have as much knowledge as we do combined to work with people with a really complex condition like this. And so we want to recognise what our skills are and not offer things that we don't have that breadth of understanding in, so that we know that we're delivering the best kind of service to people.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting. I have actually come across quite a few members of our community that have diabetes type 1 and type 2. But before we get on to that, because there are questions that get asked a lot, because I think the prevalence of type 2 diabetes is getting higher and higher now, and there's quite a lot of media surrounding it as well. And a lot of the time, you'll probably know this as well, that a lot of the time it's scaremongering. Like, if you eat this, you're going to end up with diabetes, or you're going to increase your risk, and all these kinds of things. But before we get into that, I thought I would ask you, in your line of work, what is the most common misconception you hear when it comes to like nutrition or food or exercise? Is there something that you come up against a lot in particular, or?
I suppose the one that, so I still do quite a lot of clinical work, so pretty much every day, Monday to Friday, I'm in a clinic. So the most common one I'd come across is all starchy carbs are bad. So, you know, don't worry, I've already cut out bread, I simply couldn't go near pasta, that sort of thing, because it's got this, so it's, people just have this impression of those foods are the ones that will either cause people to gain weight or are particularly bad for diabetes of any single kind, whether that's type 1, type 2 or gestational. And that just simply isn't true. And quite often when delving deeper, it can be a genuine misunderstanding of what is a carbohydrate. So people might be quite happy to eat porridge and fruit, but not really understand that that's carbohydrate, because those are, you know, considered healthy carbohydrates, but bread and pasta most typically are the ones that will come up in conversation. You know, those are really unhealthy carbohydrates. So it's really unpicking where this misconception has come from, what people's goals are, and actually how that will impact either on blood glucose levels, on weight, on blood lipids and things like that as well, to really unpick what's their goal, is it going to have an actual effect. And more often than not, it's yes, we can include bread, yes, we can include pasta, as well as other kinds of carbohydrates as part of a healthy, balanced diet. So it's always quite nice when people leave the clinic room thinking, oh, I can actually have some pasta.
Yeah, I think it, like, sometimes I think that does the rounds now, like carbs are bad for you. I remember when I was younger, like, if I ever wanted to lose weight, it was like the first thing that I used to do would be like, carbs are bad, I'm not going to eat any. And then I used to be teaching like 20, 25 hours of fitness classes a week.
Oh, wow.
With no carbohydrates. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, wow.
Not the best part of my career, let's put it that way. So it's nice to hear someone else say that as well, because just the other day I had someone ask me, do you eat carbs? And I'm like, yes, why? And they're like, whoa, but you're not overweight. It's like, and it's still there. It's still quite a big thing, I think, for a lot of people. So let's just confirm that carbohydrates are not bad for you. They are, I would say, they are needed in all circumstances. Really, they are. Absolutely. Carbs are life.
I mean, carbs are definitely some of the best foods, aren't they? I mean, particularly what you're describing there in terms of, fitness classes, which I'm guessing are going to be some like high intensity things like that as well in there. I mean, getting that carbohydrate for that fuel, we know, particularly in terms of getting any kind of performance out of it, it's pretty essential as well.
I don't know how I did it when I look back. I actually physiologically don't know how I did it.
Oh, wow, I see.
Yeah. So back to your work with a lot of diabetic patients, clients. Can you tell us the difference between the different types of diabetes and what the difference is between them before we talk about them anymore, so that the listeners can understand the difference?
Absolutely. So the two main types of diabetes are type 1 and type 2 diabetes. If we put that into context, so there's about 6 different types of diabetes, but these are the most well-known types of diabetes. So if we start off with type 1 diabetes, type 1 diabetes is what we call an autoimmune condition. And what that means is that the body attacks itself, so it has an immune reaction to itself, and it starts destroying some cells in the pancreas. And the pancreas is an organ that produces a hormone called insulin. Now, if we don't produce insulin, then the sugar or the glucose in our blood that we get from food can rise. And it's really normal to have a certain amount of glucose in the blood, but when it starts rising, it can damage our bodies. The best way I think about describing this is, imagine if you spill a little bit of juice or a little bit of a sugary drink on a table. and you leave it, it goes sticky. Now, imagine if you kept doing that over and over again. That tabletop is going to get really, really sticky, and it's, things are going to get stuck to it. You're not going to be able to work on it. It's just, it's a bit nasty. And that's what can happen in our bodies. Our bodies, our organs can get sticky in some respects. Mm-hmm. So the treatment for type 1 diabetes is insulin, and that comes in an injection. Sometimes it can be inhaled as well, but that's not too popular at the moment. It doesn't really work as well. It's not as accurate. Mm-hmm. And for type 1 diabetes, it usually, not saying always, it usually affects younger people rather than older people. We don't know why it happens. There's a few different theories out there, but the fact is we still don't know why it happens. And it's also a lifelong condition as well. So once it starts, it continues for the rest of life. So then if we go on to type 2 diabetes, type 2 diabetes is more to do with something called insulin resistance. So there's no immune aspect to it. The body isn't fighting itself. But what's happening is that the body's insulin just isn't working as well as it used to. There are several different treatments for this. The first and the biggest one is around lifestyle and diet. So this is one of the main ways of treating type 2 diabetes. Later on, if people need to, they can go onto tablets, and eventually they can go onto insulin as well. So you can see that the two big things that are different are the fact that it's not autoimmune, and the treatment is quite different as well. Another big difference is that it usually affects older people. Now, again, we are seeing a rise in younger people developing type 2 diabetes, but we know that that is linked to lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Type 2 diabetes is also it's the biggest share of the diabetes world. Mm-hmm. So it will take up about 90% of people that identify as having a form of diabetes. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the two big ones in the diabetes sphere.
So type 2 diabetes has a bit of stigma attached to it, I think. Do you think that? Is it always lifestyle related type 2 diabetes, or can you develop type 2? Is anyone at risk?
Yeah, so we know that certain people are at more risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So, for example, if you are from certain ethnic populations, like sort of Southeast Asian or subcontinental India, African communities, that's genetics, and there's not much we can do about that. We also see it in families as well. So if you've got like grandparents, aunties, uncles, mums, dads, brothers and sisters that have type 2 diabetes, then that person that is related to them is more likely to develop type 2 diabetes as well. Mm-hmm. But the big thing with type 2 diabetes is around weight and lifestyle. Mm-hmm. We know that if you have a higher BMI and you're less physically active, then you are more likely to develop type 2 diabetes.
So with regards to the sort of myths surrounding type 2 diabetes, I've been doing a lot of training and things on pre-diabetes recently. Mm-hmm. And two of the questions I get asked the most are, well, the first one, does eating too much sugar cause me or will put me at more risk of developing type 2 diabetes? Is it the sugar that is causing it, or is it a big cause?
So I think because, as Will explained, with diabetes, that is a case of blood glucose levels that are most commonly higher, but sometimes can be lower, so a hypoglycemia. So it's associated with blood sugar levels. So people often associate that with sugar that we eat, and whether that comes from a variety of sources. But most commonly, we'll still hear people say, oh, I've got a really sweet tooth, that means I'm probably going to get diabetes. We know that, as Will was saying, that it's more so associated with being overweight. Mm-hmm. And being overweight is due to a surplus of energy, which we measure in the form of calories, which means that we're taking in more energy than we need or expending. Now, that can be coming from a variety of nutrients. That could be coming from carbs or fat and or protein. And alcohol has got quite a significant energy to it as well. So we know that if people have a higher alcohol intake as well as other nutrients as well, that can contribute to being overweight. So it's more so when we do have more weight on our bodies in the form of fat, that's more likely to contribute to developing type 2 diabetes than specifically a diet that's higher in sugar itself.
Yeah, so it's not the sugar directly, it's the the higher energy intake, which is much easier to achieve if you eat a lot more sugar, because these things tend to be higher energy density as well as high in sugar. So yeah,
it's very easy. I mean, particularly if we think about say sugary drinks or foods that have got added sugar in them, how much energy we could be consuming through those without even realising it. Did you hear that over the plane?
Yeah. We should just say for the listeners that Will and Emma are outside because we're recording on one of our lovely sunny days. In fact, you know what? I've not actually even been outside today. I've been recording all day.
Oh wow!
It's sunny. It's sunny.
Later.
Yeah. I hadn't put this on the podcast outline, but this is just for personal interest as well as, and I do know that we have a lot of listeners and members of Ditch the Diet as well who are type 1 diabetic. So this is a question that I'm going to put to you for you guys. I have also heard that type 1 diabetes can be managed through lifestyle as well. Is there a way of improving your lifestyle through improving the symptoms or the knock-on effects of having type 1 diabetes through lifestyle as well as using insulin as a treatment?
Yeah, so I think both of them go hand in hand. The current guidelines for managing type 1 diabetes with regards to food and nutrition are very similar to the rest of the population. So it's all about getting a really healthy balance that includes all different aspects, so carbs, sugars, protein, fats, moderate alcohol intake, looking at reducing intake of red meat, increasing protein from non-animal products, and reducing salt. There's no getting away from it that we need to take insulin if you have type 1 diabetes. There's no getting away from that. If you don't take insulin for type 1 diabetes, that is bad news. Now, what you eat does definitely have an effect, and it can sort of play a big part in it. The current guidelines is for type 1 diabetes is to what we do is carb counting. So people count their carbohydrates and then they change it into an amount of insulin, and that's usually personalized to them, and then they take the insulin for what they're eating. Now, there's been a lot of studies that show even if you have a low carb diet or a high carb diet, as long as you're taking your insulin with it, you still get the same results. So you can manage type 1 diabetes in a way that is effective for your overall health, and it's not going to have any detrimental effect. There are so many aspects of type 1 diabetes that go into getting the results that people do that it's really difficult to say, okay, well, if you have this an amazing diet, it's going to solve everything. Unfortunately, that's not just the case. And also it's recognizing the fact that what might be an amazing diet to me is going to be an amazing diet to someone else, because there are so many aspects of diet. It's not just what we put in our mouth, but it's how we feel about it, it's how we react to it, it's how we fuel our bodies for movement and exercise, it's what we do socially. So as it stands, then yes, it can interplay with it, but it's not going to be the big main factor that's going to get the results.
It's not the same in terms of type 2 diabetes, where that can have a really significant impact in looking towards a remission of type 2 diabetes. We know that when people have type 1 diabetes, they're always going to need a certain level of a background insulin. Now, whether that comes from injections or from an insulin pump, and if people are eating no carbohydrates at all, if they find that that's a lifestyle that works for them, they will always need a form of insulin regardless of that. And as Will said, then it's managing any additional boluses, what we call, of insulin to match with carbohydrate, and adjusting that for things like exercise, in terms of other hormones, stress, illness. There's all these other factors So it's not just as straightforward as it might seem initially anyway.
And you just mentioned something there that I forgot to ask earlier, but I've just glanced at my notes. And that is, can you reverse type 2 diabetes? I know you used the word remission there, which is slightly different, but the one you hear a lot in the media is the fact that it's reversible. Is that true?
Yeah, so words sort of come and go in and out of fashion, and the one that is in fashion at the moment is remission. So it's similar to the idea of reversal. The idea is that type 2 diabetes can go away. Now, the one word that we don't use, that we sort of try and steer clear from as much as possible, is cure. We know that we can't cure type 2 diabetes, we can't cure type 1 diabetes. But what remission or reversal means is that we can make type 2 diabetes sort of go away to a certain extent. So that might be reducing medications, or it might be coming off medications altogether. And it has to be for a certain period of time. So for about 6 months to 12 months for it to be considered remission or reversal. It doesn't mean that it's going to come back though. And, that might happen sort of later on down the line. Unfortunately, we don't know how long that time period is. We know that it's very much closely related to people's weight, especially sort of if people are carrying excess fat around the middle. And we know that that's sort of linked in with their activity levels as well. It's really exciting though, because this didn't used to be an option a few years ago. As far as we were concerned sort of 10 years ago, if you got type 2 diabetes, then you had to look at diet and lifestyle, but it was sort of medications, and then maybe a few years later, put some more medications. But this is so exciting that now we've got another option that doesn't involve medications, and that people can be empowered to make changes to their diet and lifestyle to make the type 2 diabetes sort of go away for a bit.
That's amazing. It's great for anyone that's listening, I guess, to be able to have that hope of, okay, this is not a lifelong thing. There's something that I can do about it. The last question I have before we wrap up is regarding, this is one that could go off on a tangent, but I'll try not to. Does intermittent fasting help with reversing type 2 diabetes?
So there's a few different types of intermittent fasting. I think the ones that we come across most commonly are things like the 5-2 diet. So you'd have 5 days of eating your usual amount of calories, and then 2 days of a really severe energy restriction. So it's recommended for women that's about 500 calories a day. So pretty general. And again, men 600 calories a day, regardless of your size, build, energy expenditure, etc. And that's a really low amount of energy to be taking in on one day. And probably, it's not something we'd recommend people do consistently, because you just need more than that to keep you going. The idea behind that is over those 2 days, you have such an energy restriction that will contribute to weight loss. Now, there are some studies which suggest that it might have different impacts on our metabolism compared to a continuous energy restriction. So say if we went from 2,000 to 1,500 calories for 7 days a week, the impact on things like our blood lipids and our blood glucose levels might be slightly different than if we do the 5-2. Now, there's been a few small trials from this so far, but it's definitely at the stage of thinking, well, we need to do this in bigger numbers and find out what's happening across the population in general. This kind of diet can work really well for some people who find that on a couple of days a week they can make those changes, and on other days of the week it just doesn't work so well for them. The other kind of intermittent energy restriction or intermittent fasting, some people might have heard of the 16-8 diet. Now, this isn't so much to do with days of the week, but more so a time restriction on the feeding. So you choose an 8-hour block, so that might be starting at midday and ending at 8 o'clock in the evening, and that's your time in the day where you can eat. So for some people, they find that skipping breakfast can work really well for them to try and contain the eating within this time. Most commonly, I've heard it work quite well when people find that they tend to graze in the evening, so they might have their 8-hour time block starting a little bit earlier and ending a little bit earlier. So they have that evening meal, 6-7 o'clock, perhaps something like that. And then if they do tend to find that they tend to be reaching for things in the evening, by having that cut-off point, that can really restrict those extra things, which quite often can be contributing to stalling someone's weight loss or leading to weight gain without us recognising it so much. And in that respect, those diets can both contribute to weight loss. There has been more research about more of the 5-2, but again, we're looking to see what's happening on a grander scale with that, to see if it does have metabolic implications as well.
So at the moment, it's really a case of it's a tool that you can use in order to reduce your body weight to a healthy weight, which in turn will contribute to perhaps putting type 2 diabetes into remission or avoiding it altogether.
Yeah. I mean, as Will said earlier, we're all different, and it's a diet that, whilst there's a way of eating that might work well for one person, that would be someone else's idea of absolute health. So it's got to be something that we know that we can sustain in terms of lifelong health. So that's where some people find that they work really well with a lower carbohydrate diet if they're not someone who finds that they particularly feel like they need that energy from some starchy carbs, but find they can get on with smaller portions of things like fruits and beans and pulses. Fantastic. That might not work particularly well for somebody else who's really craving and missing those kind of foods. And we know that if that is what you're really after, then cutting those sort of foods out for a long period of time is not going to be sustainable, and it's really not going to be a lifelong way of healthy eating.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing.
No worries. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting us.
Before you go, I have some questions for you.
Cool.
And all I want you to do is answer true or false. That's it.
Okay.
Hope we said the same word.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have 4 questions for you. We answered one earlier. Do I need to cut out carbs, or I need to cut out carbs in order to be healthy? True or false?
False.
Should I drink celery juice to detox my body?
False.
So hard to just say one word at that. It's like, no.
Yeah. We'll leave it at false, but there's a lot more we could say.
Am I addicted to sugar?
Ooh,
Is it possible to be addicted to sugar? False. Excellent.
No, false.
And this is an actual listener question, by the way.
Oh.
My hairdresser told me that a 48-hour fast is a good way to lose weight.
False.
Yeah.
So false. You can't see me right now, but I'm cringing.
I'm so glad.
Giving out diet advice.
48 hours as well.
What would happen if we started giving out hairdressing advice?
People have some rubbish hair.
Definitely. I can't imagine going for 48 minutes without eating, let alone 48 hours. But there you go.
No.
I have a large appetite.
You're a very angry person.
If anyone, any listeners want to find out more about what you do and how you could possibly help them if they need some help with management of diabetes or otherwise, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
So there's a few different ways. You can either visit our social media. So we're on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at WeNutritionUK. Or you can go to our website, which is www.wenutrition.co.uk, or just shoot us an email, hello@wenutrition.co.uk.
That's brilliant. I'll put all of those in the show notes. So if you are listening and you want to get in touch, just scroll down on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening. There'll be some links you can just click straight through there. And all that's left to say is thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Will and Emma for your time and for taking that precious time, I'm sure, to record the podcast with me this week. It's very much appreciated. If you have enjoyed listening to this episode and you think you know someone who might benefit from listening, please feel free to share it with them. And also, like I said at the beginning, please don't forget to leave a review and subscribe. So let's talk about the Ditch the Diet Academy for a second, because Ditch the Diet Academy reopens next Thursday, the 12th of September, if I've got my dates right. I'm absolutely rubbish at dates, by the way. And we are reopening to new members next week, which is quite exciting. This will be our final opening of the year, so the next time we open for new members will be 2020, which is quite scary. I can't actually believe that next year is 2020. I don't even really want to think about it, to be honest, but there you go. The Ditch the Diet Academy is a membership programme that you can join that is basically your alternative to going back to a slimming club. Within that membership, we teach you exactly how to improve your relationship with food by learning about the basics of nutrition, learning about how to plan, how to set goals, how to map out your future in the way that you want to, and actually give you the tools that you need to build a healthy relationship with food, whatever that may look like for you, because that is going to be different for you than it is for other people. And it's really important that we give you the education that you need to go ahead and build a plan of action that suits you and suits your lifestyle. We'll give you everything that you need, including access to all of the courses that you can do online in our special membership website that works on all of your devices that you can do in your own time. We give you access to all of our email coaching, video coaching, our monthly membership packages that contain lots of live coaching, recipes, home workouts, access to a one-to-one Ditch the Diet mentor, and tons more. And we open 3 times a year for new members. Our last opening was in June. Now we are opening September, and the next one will be January. So make a head start and get joining this time next Thursday. If you want to find out more about that, just go to ditchthedietacademy.com/join. That's ditchthedietacademy/join, and you'll be able to join the waiting list, of which there is a fairly big, substantial one at the moment. So I don't want to keep you any longer. I'll be back next Thursday with another episode of the pod as usual. Until then, thanks for listening.